The moment my aunt's car disappeared around the bend, I realized she hadn't forgotten me. She had left me on purpose. I was standing outside the Greyhound station in Roanoke, Virginia, holding a duffel bag that wasn't even fully zipped, in 38-degree weather, with $11 in my pocket and a dead phone. The station had closed for the night 15 minutes earlier. I had watched the lights go off through the glass doors while I was still inside using the bathroom. By the time I came back out to the waiting area, she was gone. Everyone was gone. I remember standing there for a long time before I let myself believe what I already knew. She had done this on purpose. My aunt had raised me since I was 9 years old, after my mother passed. She never let me forget it either. Every argument, every rule, every time I stepped out of line, she found a way to remind me that she had taken me in when nobody else would. That she had sacrificed her life for me. That I owed her more than I could ever repay. I grew up walking on eggshells in a house that never felt like mine, loving a woman who I slowly began to understand didn't love me back. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. I was 28 years old the night she left me in Roanoke. We had driven up from Charlotte for my cousin's engagement party. My cousin, her son, was getting married to a woman named April, and the whole family had gathered at April's parents' house in Roanoke for a small celebration dinner. I had been invited, which surprised me, because lately my aunt had been treating me like I was barely tolerated in family spaces. She had made comments at Christmas, she had left me off the group text about my grandmother's birthday lunch, and then acted confused when I showed up uninformed. Small things, consistent things, but I was trying. I was always trying. So I packed a bag for the overnight trip, climbed into my aunt's SUV with her and my uncle and my cousin, and drove 3 hours north telling myself that this was fine, that things were getting better, that I was imagining the tension. The dinner itself was actually nice. April's mother had cooked a full spread, roast chicken, sweet potato casserole, green beans with bacon, rolls from scratch. I helped clear the table without being asked. I complimented the food twice because I meant it. I laughed at the right moments and stayed quiet when the conversation turned to family history I wasn't part of. I was doing everything right. Around 9 o'clock, my aunt said she was tired and wanted to head back to the hotel. We were staying at a Hampton Inn about 4 miles from the house. She asked if anyone was coming with her, and my uncle said he'd stay another hour with my cousin. I said I needed to use the restroom before the drive and I'd meet her at the car. 2 minutes. That's how long I was inside. When I came back out, the car was gone. I told myself she had pulled around front. I walked to the street. Nothing. I told myself she was waiting in the driveway. I walked back. Empty. I went back inside and asked April's mother if she had seen my aunt leave. She looked at me with an expression I didn't understand at the time and said, "She left about 5 minutes ago, honey. I thought you were with her." I borrowed April's mother's phone to call my aunt. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I tried twice more, voicemail both times. I texted from April's mother's number. "I think you left without me. I'm still at the house." 3 minutes passed, then my aunt replied. And what she wrote back was, "You need to learn to be where you're supposed to be." That was it. That was the whole message. April's mother read it over my shoulder. Because I had gone so still, she thought something was wrong. She put her hand on my arm and said, "Sweetheart." Just that one word, and I had to look away because I was not going to cry in front of a woman I had met 4 hours ago. I told her I was fine. I said there must have been a misunderstanding. I handed her phone back and I walked outside so I could fall apart in private. I sat on the front porch steps in the cold, and I thought about every single moment I had ignored. Every time my aunt had forgotten to include me. Every time she had looked at me across a room like I was a problem she was still deciding what to do with. Every time I had made excuses for her because the alternative, that she genuinely did not want me, was too painful to hold. I had been holding it for 19 years. The cold helped actually. It kept me focused. I needed to figure out what to do. My phone was at 10% when we left Charlotte and I hadn't charged it in the car because my aunt said the cable I was using was draining her battery. So when she left with the car, she also left with the only charger I had. My phone had died somewhere around mile marker 40 on I-81. I had $11. My debit card was in my bag, which was in my aunt's car. I had my ID and $11 and the clothes I was wearing, which were nice clothes, not warm clothes, because I had dressed up for a dinner party. I went back inside and April's mother, her name was Gloria. She told me again when I came back in, sat me down at the kitchen table, and gave me a cup of tea without asking if I wanted one. She was the kind of woman who understands when someone needs to be handed something warm and left alone for a minute. I didn't know how to thank her for that. Her husband, a quiet man who had spent most of the evening in the back den watching football, came and sat across from me. He said, "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" I said I was supposed to be at the Hampton Inn on Peters Creek Road. He said, "Do you have a way to get there?" I said I was going to figure it out. He looked at his wife. She looked at him. It was the kind of look that didn't need words. He said, "I'll drive you." I told him he didn't have to do that. It was almost 10 o'clock and the man had been hosting people in his house all evening, and he looked tired in the way that 60-something people look tired. The deep kind settled into the eyes. He said, "I know I don't have to, I want to." I almost lost it right there. I held it together. He drove me to the Hampton Inn in a quiet truck that smelled like pine and old leather. He didn't ask questions. He didn't fill the silence with observations about my situation. He just drove, and when we pulled into the parking lot he said, "You take care of yourself, all right?" Like he meant it. Like he had been saying that to people his whole life, and he'd keep saying it until he couldn't anymore. I thanked him. I watched him pull away. Then I went inside to the front desk. And that's when the next problem started. My aunt had booked the room. It was under her name, paid with her card. The woman at the front desk was apologetic but firm. She couldn't give me access to the room without authorization from the cardholder. I explained the situation as calmly as I could. I explained that my belongings were in that room, that I had no phone charger and no way to reach my family, that I was in a city I didn't know, and that I was cold. She gave me a phone charger to borrow from behind the desk. That was the most she could do, she said. I understood. It wasn't her fault. I sat in the lobby and charged my phone for 20 minutes, long enough to get to 30%. Long enough to make calls. I called my aunt first. It rang once and went to voicemail, which meant she had declined it, manually. She was awake and she was sending me to voicemail. I called my uncle. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear the party noise behind him. I explained what had happened, as matter-of-factly as I could, and there was a pause on his end that lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, "Ah, she does stuff like this sometimes. You know how she is." I had heard that phrase my entire life. It was the family's all-purpose explanation, absolution, and warning, all wrapped into 4 words. You know how she is. Don't push back. Don't make it worse. Don't expect her to be different. Just absorb it, adjust, move on. I said, "Uncle, I have no money, no way into the room, and it's 38 degrees outside. Can you please come back to the hotel?" He said he'd be there in an hour. He showed up 90 minutes later. I had been sitting in the Hampton Inn lobby for almost 2 hours by then. The woman at the front desk had brought me a cup of coffee at some point, from the breakfast station they kept stocked overnight. I hadn't asked for it. She just appeared with it, set it down next to me, and went back to her desk. I think she had figured out the shape of what was happening. My uncle let me into the room. My aunt was already in bed with the lights off. I changed into pajamas in the bathroom with the fan on, and I lay on the pull-out couch in the dark, and I stared at the ceiling for a very long time. I wasn't thinking about how tired I was. I wasn't thinking about tomorrow's drive back to Charlotte. I was thinking about a conversation I had overheard 6 months earlier, when I had come home early from work, and the house had been quiet, and I had heard my aunt on the phone in the kitchen saying, "She should have been gone by now. I don't know why she thinks she's still welcome here." I had stood in the hallway and not moved until she finished the call. Then I had gone upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed, and told myself I had misunderstood, that she was talking about someone else, that I was being paranoid. Lying on that pull-out couch in Roanoke at midnight, I finally let myself know the truth. She was talking about me. She had always been talking about me. I fell asleep at some point. When I woke up, it was early, gray light, just before 6. My aunt was already awake. I could hear her moving around the room, the sound of her suitcase zipper, the bathroom faucet. My uncle was still asleep. I sat up and she looked at me and didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "We're leaving at 8. That was it. No acknowledgement of the night before. No question about how I had gotten to the hotel. No explanation. Just we're leaving at 8, like nothing had happened." I said, "I know." She turned back to her suitcase. Something shifted in me in that moment. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something quieter and more permanent, like a door closing. Not being slammed. Just easing shut very gently with a soft click. I took my time getting ready. I ate at the hotel breakfast, scrambled eggs and a waffle and coffee. And I ate slowly because I wanted to. At 8 o'clock I put my bag in the car, and I got in the back seat, and I looked out the window the entire drive home, and I let myself think clearly for the first time in years. I thought about the apartment I had been wanting to get for 2 years, that my aunt had talked me out of every time by saying I wasn't ready, The city was too expensive. I should save more first. I should wait. I thought about the job offer I had gotten in Atlanta 8 months ago, that she had convinced me to turn down, because family should stay close. I thought about every plan I had quietly folded up and put away because she had found a reason it was wrong. I thought about Gloria, who had handed me a cup of tea without asking, her husband who had driven me across town in the dark because he wanted to. The woman at the hotel desk who had brought me coffee from the breakfast station. 3 strangers had shown me more basic human decency in one night than my aunt had shown me in years. By the time we pulled into the driveway in Charlotte, I knew what I was going to do. I didn't do it dramatically. I didn't make a speech. I went inside, I went upstairs, and I started making a list. Apartment listings in Charlotte. My savings account balance. Enough for a deposit and 2 months of rent if I was careful. The name of a woman at my job who had mentioned she knew a good leasing agent. The contact information for the hiring manager in Atlanta, who I was going to email that evening to ask whether the position had been filled. I gave myself 30 days. 30 days to get out. I found an apartment in 22. The day I moved, my aunt stood in the doorway of my room and watched me carry boxes to my friend's truck. She didn't offer to help. She didn't ask where I was going. When the room was empty, she said, "You're really going to do this? Not I'll miss you. Not I hope you'll be happy." Not even a real question, because a real question would have required her to acknowledge that my answer mattered. I picked up the last box. I turned around. I looked at the woman who had raised me, who had kept a roof over my head, and also made sure I knew every single day that I was living under her grace, who had driven away from a dinner party and left me in the cold, because she could, because I had never given her a reason to believe there would be consequences. I said I am. And I walked out. I didn't cry in the truck. I thought I would, but I didn't. My friend put on a playlist she'd made for the occasion. Upbeat stuff, nothing sentimental. And she talked about ordinary things the whole drive over, about a show she was watching, about a guy from her gym who kept leaving his weights on the floor. And I was grateful for every single word, because it meant I didn't have to feel the size of what had just happened until I was ready. We carried the boxes up to the 3rd floor. My friend helped me set up the bed frame because I had never done it alone. We ordered pizza and ate it on the floor because I didn't have a table yet, and the floors were hardwood and the walls were empty, and the whole place smelled like fresh paint and possibility. The Atlanta position hadn't been filled. The manager had actually been waiting to hear back from one more candidate and said he'd love to set up a call. I have a phone interview next Thursday. I don't know exactly what comes next. I know that I am 38 degrees cold and $11 short of the person my aunt believed I would always be: small, grateful, compliant, too afraid to leave. I think about Gloria sometimes. I think about her husband and his quiet truck, and the way he said you take care of yourself, like it was something he genuinely believed I was capable of doing. I'm starting to believe it too.